When Kyrie Irving first exploded onto the scene, it was pretty clear who he was as a player. An elite ball handler with quick twitch athleticism who could get into the defense at will, which he paired with elite outside shooting to become one of the craftiest, most gifted scorers we've ever seen. After teaming up with the all-time playmaking of LeBron James, that led to some truly remarkable playoff performances and of course a championship. Then he got traded to the Celtics, and this was the first time he'd be asked to lead a contending team as the number one. He showed growth as a player, becoming one of the league's best lead playmakers, and really coming into his own as a team defender now that he had more two-way talent by his side. That tenure only lasted 2 years though, before he was back to playing second and at times third fiddle next to more superstars, which really brought him into a new stage in his career. Whereas he had a more defined role before, now it sort of felt like what was needed of him changed on a game-to-game basis, which hit a pinnacle during this playoff run with the Mavs. They've seen 3 different opponents, and in each round the team has needed a different approach, to which he's not only answered the call, he's made it known that he's one of the most versatile guards this game has to offer. Against the Clippers, he spent quite a bit of time off the ball, and typically that means spotting up one pass away from Luka. When they clear out a side of the floor for Luka to post up, it's really tough to bring help because that means leaving Kai, who's one of the best catch and shoot guys in the league. It's the same thing against pick and roll. LA puts 2 on the ball, meaning that George has to tag from the wing, and that leaves Kyrie with a bunch of room outside to step into a triple. Over the last 3 seasons, he's hit over 40% of his catch and shoot threes, and if that wasn't enough to stress a defense, it's a scorching 45.5% when he's wide open. Basically, leaving him alone on the perimeter can be compared to giving up a layup, but as soon as he draws a hard closeout or the defense is put in rotation, he's moving the ball with speed to find one of his teammates for a great look themselves. He's a really good connector, consistently making the right extra passes to compromise a scrambling defense, and some of these are truly high-level plays, like this one where Luka draws 2 and hits the short roll, only for the ball to get deflected into the hands of Kyrie for this remarkable pass, leaving PJ with a wide open jumper. Of course, it's not just extra passing you have to worry about him doing off the catch. He'll also attack closeouts for drives, opening up a whole new world of possibility. In addition to getting Kyrie off the ball to attack a rotating defense, another point of emphasis for him in this series was playing with speed. He's always been a weapon in the open floor, using his agility and handle to get into the defense where he's not just a threat to finish, but to find one of his running teammates. In the event that he starts a drive and the paint is protected, he can stop and pop from the mid-range. If the defense meets him early to slow the push, he'll kick the ball ahead or lob it up with pinpoint accuracy. But if the defense doesn't meet him early enough, he can also pull up for transition threes. And so over the 6 games of this series, that's how he spent a lot of his time, spotting up and letting Luka create in the half court, running and gunning for fast break points with every opportunity. Well, I should say that's how he spent most of the first half, because when the second half rolled around, we saw a completely different player. Actually, he only averaged 6.5 points in first halves against the Clippers. In second halves, that was more than tripled to 20 points, including countless timely buckets in the clutch, such as in Game 4 down 1 when he drove into a packed paint and somehow got this layup to drop. A majority of his play during these second half takeovers started with how he attacked LA's bigs off of ball screens. Zubats is the textbook definition of a traditional drop big, and Kyrie absolutely torched him with pull-up threes. He's got maybe the smoothest transfer of energy we've ever seen in terms of getting the ball up off the floor and into his shot regardless of momentum, and when paired with his sheer ability as a shooter, you can't give him this much space. Again, if we look at the last 3 seasons, he's hit 39.5% of his off-the-dribble threes. For reference on how incredible that is, it's the exact same percentage as Steph Curry. In this series, he attempted 29 of them, about 5 a game, and made 12, or 41.4%. So like I said, abusing the drop coverage. And it isn't just three-pointers. He's every bit as good, if not better, on pull-up jumpers inside the arc, which again were at an all-time high against the Clippers as he shot 19 of 34, hitting 56% of these opportunities. He can also weaponize the pull-up jumper to create offense elsewhere. Here he hesitates before driving right at Zoo and shoveling it to Gafford on the roll. And when he's forced to play in between, he's got that in his bag too. Like here, he picks up his dribble with man sitting on his right hip, so he decides to float it up and in with the left. This was clearly a problem, so LA started bringing their bigs up to the level of the screen a lot more than they typically would, which created a whole new array of issues. For one, these bigs aren't exactly mobile, so when forced to defend in space like this, they're at risk of getting beat off the dribble. As a result, they most commonly went to this sort of soft hedge, where Zubac is pre-positioning himself on the side of the screen, but not coming all the way out to the ball. And Kyrie countered by playing with patience, using his live dribble to hunt for open space. Here's a great example. When he comes off the screen, Zubac is there to meet him, and instead of quickly getting rid of the ball, he uses a few extra dribbles to attack the middle of the floor and gets to a pull-up jumper. Another way he countered these coverages was with off-ball movement. Zoo steps up in the soft hedge, Kyrie gives it up to the wing with no advantage, only to immediately follow his own pass to create a driving lane before lobbing it up to Lively. Part of the reason LA really struggled to deal with these actions is that they don't have a true low man who can cover for the big when they're out of position, and that led to quite a few easy baskets. Another problem is that one thing this defense loves to do is soft switch screens that don't involve the big, so Kyrie was able to get whatever matchup he wanted. That's when he'd showcase his isolation game. A few times he got Zubac on an island, and I'm pretty sure we all know how that goes, but for the most part it was Harden who was being attacked, and that's because he's not quick enough to prevent dribble penetration. So Kyrie got downhill pretty much whenever he wanted. If nobody's there to meet him, he's got an easy lay. If he starts his drive and the big steps up, he's got a lob to the dunker spot. And if he beats his man but help meets him early, then he'll utilize his arsenal as a mid-range scorer. I mentioned the disparity in his first and second half scoring. Well, it averaged out at 26.5 points per game, which he recorded alongside 5 assists on a remarkably efficient 65% true shooting. I'm not sure you could possibly ask for better production from your number 2. And to make things even better, this was probably the best defensive series he's ever played in his career. Of course, as a small guard, he's got the standard limitations. As a low man, he's not big or strong enough to really offer resistance at the rim. He also doesn't have very long arms, so when he's out on the perimeter against a shooter like Harden, it's tough for him to really bother the pull-up jumper. So you'll have possessions where it feels like he does everything right, from switching to getting over the top of a screen to forcing the catch way outside, only for George to bump him off his spot and easily get to a mid-range jumper. However, he made up for some of those issues with constant activity. I'm not sure if it was the decreased offensive load in first halves, but his energy was off the charts. And even though he is somewhat limited physically, he uses his body well, sliding his feet and absorbing contact from Westbrook multiple times before poking the ball right out of his hands. Those hands are the key. When George puts him in jail on his hip, he perfectly times up a poke to force a turnover. At the point of attack, when Harden sets up pick and roll, he swipes down at the ball to blow up the action, and with the shot clock running low, they're forced into a really tough shot. And then when the screen does land, forcing him into recovery, he can make a play on the ball from behind. It's the same thing when he's defending off the ball. On this one, he again blows up set action by stealing a pass to Harden. Here's one where Dallas puts 2 on the ball, and it's his job to pick up the short roll, which he does with another stolen pass. I mean, truly, his hands were everywhere in this series, and he ended up averaging just under 4 deflections and 2 steals per game, marks you would expect from some of the best defensive playmakers in the league. In totality, the off-ball and transition play, the pull-up shooting and second half shot making, the ability to attack different coverages and punish switches, when paired with some really impressive defense, led to an incredible first round series as they sent the Clippers packing in 6. Then it was time to head to OKC, where things started to look a lot different. Now when he gets a screen from a wing, it isn't a soft switch, but rather 2 on the ball, to which he hits Jones in the short roll for some easy offense in the middle. It didn't matter who was defending the screener, they refused to give Kyrie any favorable switches, so instead of playing 1-on-1, it was about creating a 4-on-3 advantage for his team to attack. OKC also did an incredible job of getting back in transition to take away those easy opportunities, meaning that this series for Kyrie would be about his ability to operate in the pick and roll. The thing is, all of that drop coverage was over. He would be hedged on pretty much every screen, so the attack points were slightly different. Remember I mentioned that he attempted 29 pull-up threes in round 1. Well, in round 2, he only attempted 13, and that's because the Thunder placed an emphasis on not giving him space. This series wasn't about the shot making itself, it was about how the threat of his shot making opens up everything for the guys around him. Same thing inside the arc. Chet picks him up early and leaves him with no room to get to the mid-range, so he hits a rolling lively for easy points at the rim. Here's another example. He's essentially trapped with no apparent outlet and is somehow able to find an angle in between the 2 defenders to create a dunk for Gafford. His interior passing in these games was nothing short of impressive. Again, you have the hedge, and he hesitates before taking an extra dribble to get the ball around Chet and to some more free points. OKC took these coverages to another level though. It wasn't just about the big coming up in a hedge, the low man, in this case Josh Giddey, was also pre-rotating to sit under the basket, essentially saying that they could have the corner 3 whenever they wanted. On this one, they're running double bigs, so when he beats Jay Will's hedge, he's running into a roaming Chet, to which he drops it off to Lively for a huge finish through contact. That emphasis on taking away drives wasn't only against pick and roll. This time Kyrie attacks in early offense, and you can see how the entire defense collapses in on him, so it's a real easy pass to Josh Green in the corner. Here it is again. Off the catch, he attacks a closeout. Isaiah Joe comes over from the weak side to step in front of him. The goal was to make role players shoot and try to win the variance game, which didn't exactly go in their favor. Well, one part of their plan worked. Kyrie only attempted 8 shots at the rim over the entire series, about 1 per game. What they failed to consider is that PJ Washington would turn into Klay Thompson and hit 47% of his threes on over 8 attempts a game. In fact, the coverage was so aggressive that PJ actually ended up outscoring Kyrie in the series. Kai averaged just 15.7 points a game, the second lowest scoring series of his career. Actually, it's the lowest if we don't count the 2015 Eastern Conference Finals where he only played 2 games, one of which he left early with an injury. What's really interesting though is that he actually got downhill more against the Thunder than he did against the Clippers. 2 more drives per game, yet he scored about 1 less point as a result of the difference in defensive attention. Even on those drives that he did score, you can see how difficult it was. He first attacks right, running into help, then when he gets back to his left, he's running into more help with a shot blocker under the basket, and all he has access to is a tough runner with the left. Here's one that starts with him isolating from an open side. He beats J-Dub, only for Chet to meet him before he can even touch the paint, to which he counters by spinning back to the mid-range. Like I said though, his pull-up jumper wasn't falling like it was in round 1. Not only did the Thunder make more of an effort to take it away, when he did get to it, he wasn't as hot, so in addition to the low-scoring 16 points a game, he was noticeably less efficient, just a measly 53% true shooting. As I mentioned though, he made up for some of that through his playmaking, leveraging the threat of his scoring into high quality opportunities for the guys around him, and he also made timely shots when absolutely necessary. In the final minute of Game 3, he hit an incredibly tough floater with the left to make it a 2-possession game. Down 5 in the 4th quarter of Game 6, he knocked down a huge spot-up 3 to completely swing the momentum, and a few minutes later with the shot clock running down, he did this to give them the lead with some help from the rim. So although it wasn't quite as blistering an offensive performance as round 1, he made a big impact offensively, and he also picked up right where he left off on the other end. Again, it's the activity. It starts with a timely switch, then he gets in front of a backdoor cut to steal a pass. He also held up shockingly well against Shea in isolation. There's only so much you can do against a scorer like that, but I was impressed on some of these possessions. It goes without saying that the size limitations definitely show up in these spots, just not enough size and length to consistently contest Shea's pull-up jumper, but against everyone else, his hands continue to make a difference. Dort tries to take him on a drive, and he swipes the ball off his leg to force a turnover. This time it's Chet who he picks up on a switch, and before the big man can even start an attack, Kyrie's picking his pocket. I wouldn't say it was quite the defensive series that round one was, but he still made some plays, held his own as needed, and clearly played a role in slowing OKC's offense down to well below what they typically look like. So through 2 rounds, we've seen him play 2 very different styles. Against the Clippers, it was about off-ball scoring, fast pace, running pick and roll versus softer coverage, and hunting mismatches to attack one-on-one. Against the Thunder, it was about slower pace, running pick and roll versus aggressive coverages that required more playmaking to counter, no switching, so less one-on-one, and spraying the ball out to shooters when attacking a packed paint. That takes us to the conference finals, where some new adjustments were required. See, the Wolves too place a heavy emphasis on taking away the rim, but the style in which they do so is a lot different than the Thunder. Instead of having a big rotate early with the weak side guy dropping behind him, they'd sit one big under the basket, to which Kyrie has the ultimate counter. I'm of course referring to the floater. After beating Cat's hedge, he has about 10 feet of space before he gets to Gobert, which he consistently made the most of. This time Rudy's the one defending pick and roll, and he's sitting back in a deep drop, so when Kyrie gets into the defense, he's working to get to that floater. It's the same thing in isolation. He takes Conley from an open side, beats him off the dribble, and with Gobert coming over, he stops on a dime to float it off glass. There are a few aspects of his game that allow him to so effectively utilize this area of the floor. For one, his deceleration. That ability to stop on a dime is crucial for creating separation. There's also his ambidextrous finishing. When he drives middle and Edwards is sitting on his right hip, he can float it up and in with the left. Most importantly of all though, is the sheer touch. I'm not sure how many players in the league even think about attempting this, let alone put it in without even grazing the rim. I talked about the difference in driving volume. Well, he attacked downhill more than either of the first 2 rounds, and out of those attacks, he scored considerably more points, twice as many as in the OKC series. That's because he had a field day in the paint, nearly 12 points a game, again, noticeably more than what he did during the first 2 rounds. And the manner in which he attacked really put stress on the Wolves' bigs. You don't want to let him get to the floater, but step up and he's turning it into a lob. So he was able to consistently force the defense into picking their poison, which essentially left them without an answer for these drives. If we go back to that graphic and add assists, it was also his best series in that regard, just completely picking apart the #1 defense as a slasher. A majority of these attacks started in the high pick and roll, where Minnesota tried a bunch of different coverages but to no avail. A few times they went to a deep drop, but as we saw against the Clippers, that isn't always a great idea. So for the most part, they brought Gobert up to the level of the screen in a high drop. Similar to the soft hedge from earlier, Kyrie was able to counter this coverage by keeping his dribble live and hunting for space. When it was Cat defending, they went to a hedge. Kyrie appears to be driving right, only to cross back to his left, then drive right as he gets to a pull-up jumper. By bringing these more aggressive coverages like OKC, they were able to limit the 3-ball. It's actually crazy, he took more pull-up threes against the Clippers than he would over the next 2 rounds combined, and I think the difference in shot profile is a testament to his offensive versatility. I will say there are some similarities between rounds 1 and 3 though. One was the way Kyrie punished mismatches. Against Harden, it was about speed. Now he was hunting for Mike Conley so that he could play big, primarily with his fine-tuned back to the basket game. Another similarity was the way he took over second halves, and in particular fourth quarters, with timely shot making to help push his team forward in the closing minutes. And finally, for a third similarity, he got back to playing with pace, where once again the entire transition arsenal was on display, most notably his all-time finishing at the rim. I don't think his defense was anything crazy in this series, and it really didn't need to be as they took care of the Wolves in 5 games. He averaged 27-5 on 58.5% true shooting against one of the best defensive teams of the 21st century. Taking into consideration what the team needed from him in each of the 3 rounds and how differently each defense played him, I think the box score really undersells his performance. Not that 23 points and 5 assists on 59% true shooting is bad or anything, just that you wouldn't look at it and think perfect number 2. Where that impact shows up is on the scoreboard. I don't think playoff plus minus is the most reliable information in the world due to sample size, but I do feel like there's been a pretty consistent trend with the Mavs. Of course, the trend I'm referring to is that when Kyrie's on the floor, great things happen. When he's not on the floor, not so great things happen. Overall, he's a plus 121 after 17 games, first on the Mavs and 4th in the playoffs behind just 3 Celtics players. His ability to play off of Luka as a number 2, imitate a number 1 for extended periods of each game, especially in crunch time, and the fact that he's playing the best defense of his career have all led to a remarkably valuable playoff run, helping lead his team to the NBA Finals in a very different fashion from what we've seen in the past. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Kyrie. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.